there's
Oh
a
God, I do
lot of
that.
patterns of what's called cognitive distortions. And by identifying the distortions and examining where is the evidence, where's the evidence that he's mad at me? And if that were true, what would that mean? And that is an example of getting to a core belief. When we have a lot of irrational thoughts, they stem from irrational core belief.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Eyes Wide Open. Our guest today is Judy Belmont. Judy is a retired therapist with her master's degree in clinical psychology. However, she's far from retired, as we'll find out momentarily. She's been focused on public speaking and helping coach people to live happier and healthy lives. She's also the author of 11 mental health books and 2 therapy card decks. And her latest book, released earlier this year, called 110 Tips and Tools for the CBT Toolbox, CBT being cognitive behavioral therapy, which offers proven strategies for working through anxiety, depression, stress, and many other mental health challenges. Welcome, Judy. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it is my pleasure. I'm excited to talk to you today. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, as I like to say, I like to ask all my guests what they wanted to be when they were growing up and how that changed over the years to where you are now.
I always wanted to be a psychologist, and I became one, always, ever since I was younger. I guess my family had a bit of dysfunction, and I was always kind of like sensitive and curious. And it always kind of appealed to me to kind of figure things out. And I was a psychology major in college, never thought of any other major.
Oh,
And
wow.
my psychology experience expanded with some of the life situations that I got into. I kind of fell into speaking. I fell into publishing just by chance. But it was always with loving to help people and understanding people and understanding how to help yourself.
Well, I am, I know we don't know each other well. We chatted for a few minutes. I am like the biggest advocate of self-care and not manicures and pedicures and massages and stuff, but like really what are the things that recharge you? So we'll definitely get into that. You spent several years in more traditional clinical therapy. Is that right?
Well, I
Yeah.
had a private practice for many
Yeah.
years in Pennsylvania, but my second job out of graduate school was a program that taught assertiveness training for women. I just basically I worked at a youth guidance center 25 hours a week in Massachusetts, and I needed another 15 hours. So I looked in the paper. We're talking about now, late 70s. And I looked in the newspaper. That's where you would find jobs. And there was 15 hours a week, masters in counseling, psychology, whatever, to do assertiveness training. And I thought, okay, I have no idea what assertiveness training is. My program that I went for my master's in was a very psychoanalytic program. So it wasn't big into hands-on skills. But I thought, okay, well, I need 15 more hours a week. So I applied and I got the job. And that kind of changed my life because it taught me how to teach stress management, how to help people learn practical hands-on skills. And so I always augmented my therapy practice with doing some workplace wellness speaking and some keynote speaking on just how to live a healthier life, how to have a healthier workplace, how to manage stress, how to communicate more effectively. And it kind of evolved from there, just from that little 15-hour week job that I just needed to round out for 40 hours a week.
Isn't it funny how sometimes those little nothings end up being the whole like path for your life? I think that's
Absolutely. And I'll never forget, I remember her actually saying this. My the director of this program said, the pay isn't very much, and it really wasn't very much at all. It was actually at a YWCA. The pay is not much, but the experience you will get will last a lifetime. I'll never forget when she said that. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I just want my 15 hours a week. And she was right. So I think of
That's
that.
great. That's great. Not that I want to pivot completely into this, but I feel like the whole stress in the workplace and mental health in the workplace, there's been a huge shift the last, at least since COVID, I would say, for mental health and wellness in the workplace. But one thing that I've noticed, and I've written about this on LinkedIn a few times, is that a lot of times in the workplace, it seems like it's more speak than action. So I'm curious from your experience, because you've been doing this a long time, in the workplace, like what do you think, or what have you seen is a company's role in mental health for their employees? And then what's the role of the individual in their own mental health when it comes to work stress?
Well, the companies, of course, there's some small and large. So, smaller places don't have the kind of resources, but any emphasis on well-being, the mind-body connection is really important. Offering EAP. I actually started as a therapist as an EAP counselor, employee assistance therapist. There was an employee assistance program, that's EAP. And having, that particular program was 3 sessions, and then I would refer people because we didn't do long-term counseling, but we would assess and then find the right providers for them in the area. And I think it's really important because if someone is feeling really stressed, I've seen, in my practice, I've seen so many people who were so stressed about work or unhappy about work, and it affected their sleep, their levels of anxiety, depression would go up. Workplace wellness is very, very important. And a lot of people in the workplace don't really know what to do. So workplace training, I think, is really, really vital. Once a month, I work for training.com, a seminar company who's fabulous. They offer a lot of programs, and I do dealing with toxic employees. And there's usually a lot of people on that webinar because I think it's really important. And I think there's a recognized importance of how to deal with people who pose challenges and how to just have a healthier workplace. Yeah. And there's, a lot of specific skills that people can learn, but if they don't know it, they're not going to be able to use it. So I think any emphasis on mental health in the workplace is good because it's going to help your bottom line.
I totally agree with that. I would say I'm like very prone to burnout. I work very hard, much to my dismay. And lately, actually, I've been talking about it, and I've had a couple other guests on to talk about it. But I feel like there's like a level of, when it comes to like feeling burnt out or stressed about work, and I can attest, I lose sleep over it. The Sunday scaries, which, those trickle in on like Friday evening sometimes as I dread the next week. And it's just there's always this more, and you're never doing enough, which also, and this is, a lot of workplaces, but also I think it kind of gives people no satisfaction in what they actually are accomplishing, which is what then kind of leads to some of the anxiety and the depression and the not knowing where to focus and all of those things. So so my question in all of this is, when it comes to the employee, what are some of the tactics or tips that you can share to help them manage stress in the workplace?
One of the things that I think is the most important is to talk to yourself in healthy and rational ways, because you don't lose sleep and you don't feel like you're not doing enough unless your self-talk is very negative and critical. And so be aware of the self-talk. Write down your thoughts. Is your thoughts, I'm losing sleep because I feel like I'm not good enough? Okay. Is that rational or is irrational? Who's saying that? Who's the board of directors in your head? So we need to analyze our self-talk, because nobody really stresses you out The workplace can stress you out. I actually, in my seminar, actually these webinars that I do and any live presentation, I would often ask people to fill in the blank. Stress is blank. And people would often say, overwhelming, debilitating, whatever, bad stuff.
Hmm.
But stress is actually the spice of life. We need stress to thrive. We need stress to be motivated. I want more in my life. I want more stress. I want to be challenged. I want to be invigorated. So stress is not inherently bad. But if we think stress is bad for us, if we have that negative spin, then we're going to feel more stressed out. The other thing is what's in my control and what's out of my control, and think in healthy ways. So if you say, my boss stresses me out, guess what? That's impossible. Nobody can stress you out. I don't like some of the things my boss does, and these are being specific, but no
Hmm.
one is in charge of your stress. So, how would you rephrase that? I am stressed out by some of the things that my boss says or does. Then you are not a victim, you're a victor. You're not the
Mm.
victim of someone else. So just even teasing out who's responsible for my feelings. She makes me so mad. Well, guess what? Nobody, I mean, we're not talking about abuse here. We're not talking about a criminal behavior. We're talking
Yeah.
about workplace or just general adult behavior. No one can do that. No one can make you mad. I am mad in response to what he or she did. Just even doing that will give you the good stress and not the bad stress, because stress can be good. Just think of a guitar. If you tighten the key too much, the string is going to snap. But if you don't tighten it up and enough, you're going to have droning music. To have
Mm.
beautiful music, you have to have just the right amount of stress to feel involved, challenged, committed, but not too much that you're burnt out, and not too little that you're alienated and you feel like you're not needed or good at what you do.
That's very well said. And I think you're right, actually. Stress gets sort of a negative connotation, especially when it comes to the workplace. But you're like, our brains literally thrive on and wake up on like cortisol, which is stress. So I think what's in the workplace from my experience, and I do marketing at a software company and manage some people. And I think that for me and what I see with my employees and the people on my team is it's people take on too much, don't set realistic expectations,
Right.
and those need to come from the people that are doing the work, not from the people that are passing on the work. Because
Absolutely.
they all
Need to
they've
know
got to
your
do is
limits.
exactly all they've got to
You
do is say
say I need
something.
help, or it's
Yeah.
too much, or I don't think I can do this in the amount of time that you want. You need to set limits. But so many times people are afraid, they're more non-assertive.
Hmm.
Communication is very important in the workplace. I statements. I don't feel comfortable with the expectations of this project because I don't think I can realistically do this in time.
Mm.
But a lot of
Yeah.
people are afraid of doing that. They'll say, okay, and then they're going to be stressed and upset because they don't want to cause waves. They don't want someone not to like them. They don't want to get fired. And then they can start having this
It's a
crazy
spiral.
self-talk in their head.
Yeah. You're so right. I had I wrote so I went through a public divorce and it like ruined my life for a little bit and my mental health, obviously. And I started writing in a journal that I ended up like writing a guided journal for myself. And it was every day, it was addressing these feelings, why I'm feeling this way, and like
Mhm.
reframing them. And I know you have tons of free resources, which I want to talk about on
Mhm.
your website that help with some of these things for
Yes.
people. But
Uh-huh.
what I notice from me and what I sometimes see with others is it's the spiral that gets them. It's not even the work. It's the I also have this to do and I also have this and I'm also tired and I also, there's all these other things. And then you create that spiral of am I going to lose my job and all of these other things that go into it. And in reality, like if you can kind of separate the feelings that you can control versus the stuff you can't, you really can hone in and be better at least understanding your stress, even if you're not behaving differently yet at this point. But I think that can come next.
Well, in all my books, my focus has been in providing tools and how to handle stress, because it's one thing to say, oh, I got to get a grip. How do you get a grip?
Mm.
People don't know. It's like skills that we don't really learn.
Tell
And
myself
so,
that.
for example, in the example that you just talked about, going through a very difficult situation, focus on improving your self-talk to avoid cognitive distortions.
Mm.
Cognitive distortions are unhealthy habits of thinking that will cause us to be in a spiral. So, what are some distortions? One of them can be all or nothing thinking. I'll never get over this. Why is that irrational? The word never. How do you know? That also
Mm.
is another cognitive distortion in that fortune telling. A lot of times people fortune tell. I'll never get it together. He'll never change. When you fortune tell and you blow things out of proportion, when you personalize or jump to conclusions, oh, he didn't say anything. He didn't say good morning to me. He must be mad at me. There's
Oh
a
God, I do
lot of
that.
patterns of what's called cognitive distortions. And by identifying the distortions and examining where is the evidence? Where's the evidence that he's mad at me? And if that were true, what would that mean? And that is an example of getting to a core belief. When we have a
Mm.
lot of irrational thoughts, they stem from irrational core belief. So, for example, jumping to conclusions. He didn't talk to me. He must be mad at me. If so, what would that mean? It would mean that I'm not likable.
Mm.
Okay. If that was true, what would that mean? It would mean that I'm worthless or I'm not important. And so by identifying your core beliefs, you can kind of tackle more all the offshoots of all that because you identify some of your core beliefs. But people don't know how to do that.
No.
That's why I have the books that I do that evolved over the years, um, to because that turned into what I became very passionate about.
Yeah. So you recently wrote the book 110 Tips and Tools for the CBT
Yes.
Toolbox. I'd like to talk about that, but before that, can you define what CBT is
Yes.
and the benefits of that and what it's used for? And it's an empirically proven therapeutic technique, so
Absolutely.
everyone knows that
Well,
out of the gate.
CBT is the most widely adopted therapeutic orientation in the world. So it's not like an offshoot therapy. It's what most therapists do.
Hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean they're totally CBT, but even what's called a supportive therapist often will help people identify their self-defeating or self-limiting beliefs. So what CBT is, it stands for cognitive behavior therapy. Cognitive is mind, behavior is behavior, and it basically helps people identify the thoughts that cause their feelings that lead to certain behaviors. So let's say you have a row of Oreos because you're upset about being rejected. The feeling is going to be devastated or upset that you're rejected. And what is the thought? Nobody likes me. I'll never get a date. I'm not appealing to people. I'm worthless or whatever. So by identifying those thoughts and restructuring and reframing, I actually am worthy. This person and I are not a good fit. You're not
Hmm.
going to be as motivated to do that behavior and have those terrible feelings. But a lot of times we think situations cause us to feel a certain way. Traffic stresses me out. No, it really doesn't. I'm stressed because of traffic.
Yeah.
So once you kind of look at things in terms of what thoughts are creating your feelings, you can't tell yourself, don't be hungry, don't be sad, don't be mad, but you can identify the thoughts and change them if they're unhealthy thoughts that cause those unhealthy
Yeah.
feelings. Now, being sad or being anxious or whatever is perfectly normal and is adaptive. We're just talking about more debilitating anxiety or depression. So, what I like about CBT is that you can be in therapy or not in therapy. You can do it's self help
Yeah.
because you learn practical techniques and you learn how. A lot of people would come into therapy telling me, I want to know why I do this, or why
Hmm.
this happened, or why my marriage didn't work out. And we can only conjecture. But what we can do is focus on what's next. What tools can you have to grow from the experience and have it make you deeper instead of weaker?
I love that. And you know what's interesting that you really resonated is, as a man who now talks about mental health all the time, as someone who had, I can identify symptoms of depression back to being like 5 or 6 years old. And I went through my teens and my 20s. I'm 40 now. I went through my teens and my 20s, and I had so much shame for how I was feeling and how there were days I like couldn't get out of bed, or I'd have to call off of work, and I would just completely withdraw. And my concept of therapy, I went the first time at like 21 or 22 years old. At a I was really poor, so I went at a community center. It was like $5 a session, community mental health facility. And I started there with the idea that they were going to tell me what's wrong with me, and I was going to get a pill to fix it, kind of thing. And as that worked for like 6 months, and I was like, I'm not ready. I learned now I wasn't ready for therapy at the time. I wasn't there. But
Right.
what really what I tell other men who I suggest try therapy, or a lot of people ask me about it, is that it isn't about something wrong with you as much as it is about when you take what you learn in that hour-long session and you start applying it in your real life. So like, it's not, therapy isn't something where you have to talk about it. If you have shame about it, like you don't have to talk about it with other people. It's just learning these techniques that you can apply in your real life. And for me, my biggest one was I had a victim mentality. I felt like everything was always happening to me. And now I joke about just having bad luck, because I have bad luck, but I'm okay with it. But now to me, it's like, how do I apply these the skills to be responsive instead of reactive? And how do I apply them when I'm at home with my family and they're triggering the shit out of me? How do I apply that at work when people, are not communicating with me the way I want to be communicated with, or I'm not communicating the way I need to communicate, and stuff like that? And those are, to me, the real skills that, as a man who now does talk about therapy, but at the time I didn't tell anyone that I was doing it when I started up again in my early 30s. And so that's what I find so fascinating. My point about what you said of CBT is about tips. It's about like practical use cases in your real life, which is how you wrote your book. So what I wanted to, first of all, if you have any commentary on men in therapy, or men and applying these things in their life, I'd love to give you the floor for that, because I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Um, my therapy practice when I was before I retired had a lot of men as well as women, and I noticed over the years there was more and more men, and it became more
Good.
and more acceptable. But the one thing that you said about in your early 20s you weren't ready, sometimes it's not a good fit with the client and the
Mm.
therapist. A lot
Which
of
I know
times
now.
people think I go to a therapist and they're like all the other therapists. No, not really at all. There's people with different orientations. And so some would fit better. So when I would see people, I would make sure, number one, that we were the right fit. And there was, a more limited number that I didn't think I could help as much, because my orientation was very much into taking responsibility
Hmm.
for actions or your thoughts. And some people just thought it was everybody else's fault and they were the
The
victim.
victim.
And they
Yep.
didn't have much patience for me. And I was not able to support them in the way that they wanted. But
Mm.
for the most part, people who really wanted to change, I could be very effective because I could offer them things that they didn't even know before. It was like learning, and I would liken it to learning a new language. It's like
Mm.
maybe when you were younger, you were learning Pig Latin, and now you're actually learning like a better, healthier language. We don't always think and have the backgrounds in knowing how to think so clearly, because it's not about blame, but like people can only act as healthy as they are.
Yeah.
So if you have people, teachers, there's bullies in school, or, parents who don't really have a good, healthy thinking skills, yeah, you're going to learn a lot of pig Latin. And so I think that, that's why then I would teach in my books things like the ABCs of situations. A is an act or a situation. We'll take the one with my boss walks by me, doesn't say good morning. The C is the consequence. Maybe you're nervous, feeling rejected, anxious. That boss not saying anything didn't cause you. Then there's the B in the middle, your belief.
Mm.
And your belief is, he must be mad at me. That's a cognitive distortion of jumping to conclusions. That would be terrible if he's mad at me. So then the D is disputing, well, who says that he's mad? And if he is, maybe he's having a bad day and maybe he has his own stuff. And the E is the effect of a healthier belief. So we just talked about A, B, C, D, and E of learning a healthier language.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to your question, men in therapy, I think that, by the way, you seem very, very, very empathetic, very deep, nice, wonderful style.
Thank you.
All the things that you went through got you deeper instead of weaker. You are a perfect example of having the depth of personality that you have persevered and risen above the upheavals and the road bumps.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for you saying that. I do. I will say, like, I've learned over the last several years, like, I can handle anything, and I am super resilient, way more than 5 or 6 year old Nick would have ever thought. So I do appreciate you saying
And I
that.
think it's great too, because men usually are not as expressive as women. Women are more likely to share things that you share today and express their feelings and be as vulnerable. And it's really beautiful in men or women, but it's a little bit more unusual with men. And that's why I love seeing men in my practice, because a lot of them would share things with me they wouldn't even share with their wives, because
Mm-hmm.
they were so afraid of being vulnerable and expressing. And then once they realized they weren't being judged and it was really okay, they could feel more comfortable expressing themselves outside of the office.
That's so well said. It's the first time I remember I hid my depression for my whole life, like up until 7 years ago. And even then, like with my therapist, she was like, well, so at the time I still get depressed around the holidays. They're not all the expectations, everything, like it's a stressful time for me.
Common,
It's not.
very common, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember like over the holidays, I was struggling, feeling depressed. This was a long time ago. And I had never told my girlfriend at the time that I had these things. And so as I'm withdrawing, she's recognizing my withdrawal, and it was causing issues. And literally my therapist was like, why haven't you told her? Why don't you just tell her?
Right.
Crazy concept. I'm like, whoa, pump the
Case in point.
brakes. Like,
Whereas women, that would be the go-to. They
yeah,
would just express themselves, because women are conditioned to express yourself. It's okay. But for men, it's a sign of, quote, not really, but might be seen as a sign of weakness or
yep,
vulnerability. And it's more socially acceptable for women to be vulnerable or, quote, weak. But
yep.
it's really a sign of strength. It always amazed me how weakness is actually a sign. Admitting weakness is a sign of strength.
And it gives you something to move forward on. That's what I think
Yes.
has been so important for me. And again, like I grew up in the if you don't stop crying, I want to give you something to cry about 80s and 90s era. So I think there's a lot of men my age that, expressing any kind of emotion or anything but anger.
Right.
Yeah. I actually, about a year ago now, a friend of mine, I'm friends with him because of this podcast. He came on, and he's an ESPN broadcaster, and he has a podcast, and he was talking about his anger management issues. And we talked into this whole thing about sports and how like anger in sports is rewarded. And so,
Yeah.
so many men watch sports, but it's a much more acceptable thing for like a Tom Brady to smash his helmet on the ground in anger than
Right.
to sit there and cry because he lost the Super Bowl, which
True.
totally acceptable feeling.
And it's interesting because women, if they're angry, it's not becoming. Men, it's okay to be angry, and women aren't. So our society kind of has expectations that sometimes is important to recognize and to break.
Yeah,
Because
it's
anger
very
is
true.
a bona fide feeling for men or women. And, people who are angry in an appropriate way make changes in the world. You need to be angry enough to really want to make some change.
Yeah.
When you don't think things are just or things are the way you think they should be. So anger isn't bad. A lot of women are like thinking, I'll never forget. I had this client once, and she was saying that she was very mad and angry. And I reassured her that that's a normal feeling. And she said, "You mean it's okay? It's okay to be angry?" Because she never accepted that. She wasn't supposed to. It wasn't ladylike to be angry. It's almost like
That's,
asking, do I have a right to my feelings? Of course you
yeah.
do.
Yeah. And I think it's not and you alluded to this if you didn't even say it directly, it's not the feelings, it's like how you respond to them, how
Mhm.
you react to them, and not letting, an emotion override you into acting reactively, right? It's
That's why it's
feeling
so
it.
important to identify what are the thoughts causing the feeling. Because if you have, for example, I'll give you an example of a tip, permanent way of thinking versus temporary way of thinking. I'll never get a job. That's permanent. Or I'll never be good in social situations. That's like all or nothing, permanent.
Hmm.
Up until now, I had trouble breaking the ice with people.
Hmm.
So, what sounds better? One is depression oriented thinking, and the other is self empowering.
That's very
Up
true.
until now, that's
Yeah.
temporary thinking rather than this is my life sentence. I'm always going to be that way. So many
Interesting.
times people tell themselves really dumb stuff and they believe it.
Yeah.
It's just our
It,
narrative.
Yeah, you're right. It's just the narrative you tell yourself.
Yeah.
Now, you just started with some tips. You've got 110 tips and tools for the CBT toolbox. Just came out this year. What I love practical stuff, right? Because I do think you look at therapy, you look at any topic, and it's too big, it's too much. So, like, how do you
Right.
make it digestible? And
Make it
um,
little bites.
exactly. And also, we have no attention span anymore.
That's right.
But
Quick and short and effective, right?
exactly. So, what prompted you, and this is your 11th book, what prompted you to write this specific book on the tips and tools?
Well, to be honest, my publisher asked me, and I said yes.
Mm,
So it's not like I had a burning desire to write another book. I didn't actually think I was going to write another book, but they said my books are selling pretty well, some of them. And I have different publishers, but this was my
mm,
main publisher, which is Pessy, which is a mental health publisher who's just fabulous, and they have fabulous books. Um, they asked if I'd write another one. I said, sure. And so I have always liked CBT. And I've always believed in it. And I said, what would you like me to write about? And they wanted me to write about CBT. So that's really why I did it. But I couldn't write about anything I didn't know about and didn't believe in.
of course.
And I would say that, there's a lot of other types of therapy like ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, DBT, dialectic behavior therapy. Every type of therapy that I know of, pretty much except psychoanalysis, has a very big chunk of CBT in it. So it was a
Hmm.
very natural thing for me to do because in any type of orientation, CBT is a cornerstone.
Yeah. I think everything aside from Freudian psychoanalysis or whatever it was called. I think they're all kind of CBT because ultimately it is how you behave. It is what's happening in your head. And
Thoughts. You control your feelings, and then your behaviors. Yep. It's a
exactly.
cycle. It's called the triad, the cognitive, the triad.
Yeah. So you decided to write 110 tips and tricks.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to go through all 110 of those with you, but I think people would benefit from checking out your book, and that link is in the show notes below. But
Great.
what are some of the, you shared a few, but what are some of the other tips that are in your book that people can apply to their everyday life and learn more about if they decide to read your book?
Well, one of the tips that I've always liked is to develop an observing head. So if you're feeling emotionally charged and upset, to imagine, first thing, think of what your thoughts. I'm always getting back to identifying your thoughts, and then imagine them on a cloud and observing it. And instead of it's called cognitive diffusion. Instead of looking from your thought that, let's say, I'm a loser, you're looking at your thought. There I go again, thinking I'm a loser. So you're defusing that thought from your head and you're looking at it rather than from it. And that can bring a lot of peace to people because it makes you distance yourself from your distressing thoughts. So you can do that with imagining leaves on a stream, and that's a part of acceptance and commitment therapy. Stephen Hayes has that as a very popular technique because, again, CBT is in all these types of therapy, and I include them all. Imagine that you have an upsetting thought that, I'll never find someone to love. And you put it on a leaf and you diffuse it from your head. And so you don't believe it anymore necessarily. You're watching it and you watch it float away. That's an example of an imagery. I really like also developing a toolkit that is for whatever you want: anxiety toolkit, depression toolkit, stress management toolkit, and actually assembling specific metaphorical objects and put them in a jar, put them on your kitchen counter in a basket or whatever, and they're reminders of self-care. So that could be a Hershey kiss to remind you the importance of self-love, for instance,
Yeah.
self-kindness. And then maybe an elastic band to remind you, just like the guitar string, if I stretch too much, I'm going to break. I'll have a nervous breakdown. But if I don't get engaged and committed, I'm going to feel kind of hopeless and depressed. I want to have the right amount so that elastic band can trigger. And you can do that with your kids. Let's think, of an anger management box over here. Let's think of visuals that will remind us. So that's another example. Another one is coping cards. A lot of times when, let's say you're speaking up at a meeting and you're really nervous, make up some cards, whether you're printed on the computer and print it up, or just write it on, let's say, old-fashioned note cards. When I get nervous, I'm going to remember my self-worth does not depend on what other people think of me. What I have to say is important. Maybe you can have a quote, an affirmation. Those are also in my book. Thinking of self uplift
I have
statements
a list
that
of
are reminders.
affirmations
Oh wow!
laminated.
What do you have written
Yeah.
here?
So these are, I have them laminated. I have them on my monitor here. I try to remember to read
Wow.
them every day.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you
I
share a
am,
couple?
yeah, I'd be happy to share them. I don't know. I did these over a year ago. I'm trying to remember why I did the first one, but it was, I am handsome.
Right?
I
You are.
am, thank you. I am worthy. I am divine. I am deserving of what I want. I am lovable just as I am. I will always survive. I will never give up. I'm resilient and I always try my best.
Oh wow! Okay. I love it, and that's such a perfect example of one of my tips is reminding you of your worth in whatever form you need with affirmations. And you can even have affirmations in a box. You
Mm-hmm.
put all those affirmations, you make strips, You print them up, make strips, and then every day that will be your affirmation to focus on that day. There's a
That's
lot of things you can do with affirmations to remind you of your worth.
and so practical. Like everybody essentially has access to paper and
Yep.
a box or a cup or a bowl or
Yep,
anything like that. And
exactly.
that's what I like about the way you kind of simplify things, because again, it's like you look at, even if I were to look at your book and it was um, applying CBT techniques to your everyday life, overwhelming. That's but here's 110 quick
Right.
tips and
And they're
tricks.
all on their own. So it's not as overwhelming because let's say you want to overcome regret. You go to the regret chapter and there's different, there's 11 items in each chapter, and
Mhm.
you look at what, getting over guilt, you know, having, certain topics within regret, and whichever appeals to you that day, so it's not
Yeah,
like you have to read the whole thing to get there. You just pick it up. So it's not as overwhelming as some books because you don't need to have the other 4 chapters before. You just go right there
exactly.
and you read the tip. And then there's usually a worksheet or a handout. CBT is very rich in worksheets and handouts. And because if you go to therapy, let's say, and you learn skills, it's kind of like going to have a personal training session with a physical trainer.
Hmm.
If you don't practice between sessions, how fit are you going to get? So
Very.
you need to have some of the routines that you do so that by the time you go to the session, you're already even stronger.
And you're building on your skill set. That's
Exactly.
the
Need
yeah.
repetition, like with logs and diaries. The some of the tips are like logs that you can fill out. And I recommend in my book to copy those logs so that you could keep on filling them out. And
Yes.
maybe you don't do it for a couple of weeks until something comes up and you feel the need. Then you have the tool. Maybe you
Hmm.
don't always need the tools, but
Exactly.
when you need the tools, you know where to go.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then you're not starting from scratch every single
Exactly.
time, which is how I know
Exactly.
I used to feel. Every time it would be a breakup, it'd be a tough day at work. I always felt like I was starting over. Like I learned nothing.
You, but you do.
Yeah,
You learned a lot, and it's accumulated wisdom.
that's a good point.
And you're never starting over. You start from where you were with your experience.
It's very, very well put. Um, you have a plethora of free resources on your
Yep,
website.
I do.
And I
Yep.
went to your website before we were chatting today. And what I want to say is a lot of times you go to a website and it's not always like therapist, some sort of coach or some sort of person. And they're trying to get your email. They're trying to, put you in their nurture campaign or their marketing funnel so they can sell you some kind of service. And I know you do coaching and we all got a business room, but what I appreciate and what I wanted to chat a little bit about is the number of free resources that you have that
Yes.
you don't even need to give an email. It's literally a PDF you can
Yeah.
download.
I mean,
There's
you
like
can give me your email, and you could be on my mailing list, but I don't really do much with a mailing list anyway. Um,
yeah,
I just basically want to have things out there to give people a taste of how to be a victor instead of a victim.
which is great. And so some of those resources for people, like there's stuff on assertive communication,
Mhm.
unhealthy thinking habits, stress management.
Right.
Some of the stuff I'm sure is in your book, which is something people can carry around.
Well,
But
some of them are
I,
literally from the book. I actually say
oh,
from this book, from that book, but then there's a lot that I include in the book, but I don't necessarily say they're from this book. But I have a
yeah,
lot of handouts and worksheets and visualizations, and people like self-help quizzes. And actually, in my latest book, 110 CBT tips, each of the 10 chapters have the 11th of each one of those chapters. The 11th item is a self-help quiz for that chapter that you can take over and over again to see how you're doing. So people like self-help quizzes because it can
yeah.
kind of like see what kind of range, and if they can improve on yesterday. It's not comparing yourself to anybody else. It's comparing to where you were yesterday.
Yeah. When I wrote my little self-help journal, I put at the end of every week, I had like this rating system for people to tally up how they were seeing, so that over
Great.
the course of
Yep.
8 weeks, they could see how they improved. The most people that would DM me or comment on it to me, that was their favorite part. It like wasn't the journaling, it wasn't the reflecting. It was like, I'm glad that I could like see my progress, whether it
Right.
was positive or negative. People, so you're
Great.
right about that. Even in
Perfect.
my one piece of
Good
experience I have
endorsement
with
for what
that.
I did. That's very
It
well put.
is.
Thank you.
It is. Yeah, it's very true. And I even encourage. So my girlfriend is. I don't know if she cares, but I'm going to say it. She doesn't always listen. So she has narcolepsy, and she's going through. She's recently diagnosed, so she's going through all sorts of different, medications, procedures, stuff to try and figure out what's best for her to manage it. And I encourage her. I'm like, you should track how you're feeling through all of these things, because it's up and down railroad when you're
Right.
treating a new condition, and just like start tracking the feelings and the emotions and how tired you are, how awake you are, and when you're going to sleep, and is it early or is it later, and that way you have like association of something with all of this stuff. And so it's not just it helps us, but it's also like a really practical tool for you to learn what's working and
Absolutely.
what's not.
Yep.
So that I appreciate that you do that with all of your work.
Yep.
So I encourage everyone to go check out your website and obviously your book as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I'm a fan. I actually ordered it the other day, and I think
Oh, thank you.
it's coming today. Because I'm all about the tips and the tricks and the simplicity of stuff, because I think, like I said earlier, and especially for men, sometimes therapy's scary. It's this big concept, and it's much to its benefit. It's very popular right now to talk about therapy and use therapy speak, and we're trying to destigmatize it, and so many therapists and psychologists and even neuroscientists, everybody's sort of trying to like normalize this, which is a great thing, but it can also be so intimidating. And I think that what you do and what so many people are trying to do is break it down into tiny chunks, so a
Thank you.
5-year-old can
I think it's
understand it.
important to realize that the therapy client relationship is an important one, just like and very unique. So
Mm-hmm.
if you go to a therapist and it's like it doesn't feel right or you're not really getting much out of it, there's nothing wrong with trying a different therapist, maybe with a different orientation. Sometimes it takes a while to find the right fit, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times people think therapy is sort of generic, that they go when everybody's pretty much going to do similar stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a bit, I mean, I would agree, even if you go to different doctors, you'll get maybe different ideas, but there are definite guidelines for diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you go to a therapist, there might be just a much more of a wider range of approaches and orientations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think I've talked before with therapists on this podcast about like what to look for when you're searching for a therapist, because they're not all a good fit. Just like not everyone in your life is a good person to be your friend. Some people are good best friends. Some people are good acquaintances. Some people are better off not in your life, right?
And
So
maybe they were good at one time, but not in this stage in your life, or vice versa.
exactly. Do you have any tips for people who are looking for a therapist, like how they should identify one that works for them?
Well, what I tell my friends who are looking for a therapist is I always like going on Psychology Today,
Hmm.
because Psychology Today has a find a therapist, and
That's
the
where I found
therapists
mine.
pay to be listed, but they describe themselves, they describe the orientation, they usually have a picture. You can kind of get a sense of this is a good fit for you rather than just looking up, on the internet. How do you really know? So I think that's a good way. And then looking for what the kind of therapist that you want.
Hmm.
And some therapists, I'll never forget. I had a woman I was seeing for a while with her, and then with her husband, and then didn't see her for a while because she wanted to deal with some childhood trauma stuff, and she realized my hands-on approach wasn't as good. Not that I couldn't deal with that, but She found someone who specialized in that. And then they came back because they needed a lot of parenting tips. And they knew,
Mm,
so she kind of used me for what she thought my expertise was, and then went to this other therapist for, and I think that's really good. You shouldn't feel
hmm
like, oh, I'm betraying someone. No, everybody has their own unique skills, and you use the skill, what your needs are. You want to make sure it fits the skills of the person and
Yeah,
their general outlook.
exactly. Yeah. And so there's nothing wrong with, honestly, a therapist could break up with you too. Like if they don't think they can help you and, refer you to someone who they think might do better and have that
It's happened a
discussion
couple
with
times
you.
for me. I just didn't think I could help that person.
Yeah, exactly. And that's totally
Wasn't
normal.
a good fit. No.
On a quick funny note, and then we'll get finished up here. But when I found my therapist, this is like 7 years ago now. She actually tried to break up with me like a couple of years ago, but she's like, "Do you still get value out of these? I'm doing an audit of my client." Anyway, she did not get rid of me, but I found her on Psychology Today, and I scrolled for I don't know through how many, and it was a vibe. I just, like you said, I read her
Fabulous. Wow.
profile, I saw her
Great.
picture. Yeah, like it was a vibe.
Yeah.
And I've been working with her ever since. And
Wow.
I've become
Case in
so,
point. Oh, thanks for sharing that. That's
yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I hadn't really thought about that in a long, long time, but I literally picked her on a vibe and it ended up working out. So,
that.
um, yeah, this has been so good, and again, I want to encourage everyone to
Thank
check
you.
out your book. That link is going to be below in the show description as well, and
Thank
I have um, so the book's down there. People can do that. I also have your website and all of that. But before we go, I wanted to give you a chance to ask me anything, and then we can hear a little bit from me.
you. Okay. What made you decide to do this podcast?
Good question. So oddly enough, I had wanted to start a podcast for probably 12 years now before it was cool. And I had no idea how to do
They
it.
have it 12 years ago? I don't even know.
Because I listened to like fantasy football podcasts. That was old, Nick. That's all I cared about was like sports. And I couldn't get anyone that wanted to like really start one with me. And it just kind of died and died and died. And then it's something I've thought about ever since, and it's evolved. And like sometimes I'm super into like news and politics. So I thought about doing that. And then what really happened was, I had my 15 minutes of fame from reality TV, and I was like, well, now's the time to do it.
Wow.
So yeah. So what do I care about? And I'm like, well, I want to talk about mental health and culture and holistic wellness and helping
Great.
give expertise and my experiences and hopefully help people. And the show's called Eyes Wide Open. Go through life with your eyes wide open so you can be like prepared,
Enlightened.
knowledgeable, have the skills, understand what's happening around in the world around you. Try and be healthy. And I advocate walks. The getting a dog that I have to walk multiple times a day was the best thing that ever happened to me for managing my depression. Because now in the morning, no matter what, I have to get up and walk this dog.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's a game changer. So I do it every morning
wow.
now.
People ask
Yeah.
about your dog. You start chatting with people. It's a
Yeah.
good social lubricant.
It is. It is. I will say I probably talk to more people over dogs these days than anything else, like new people. But so yeah, I just decided I wanted to do that. Podcasting is hard. It's not easy. It's just
It's
showing
like
up
a
here.
lot of work. I'm
Oh,
just so impressed that
uh,
you
all
pulled
the
it
work.
together.
Yeah, but I actually stopped for a little while, and I started removing because I had overbooked myself. I was just working my full-time job, doing my podcast, doing all this other stuff. And I never had time to relax. And then I met my now girlfriend, and I was like, I don't have time for you. And that was kind of like a wake-up call for me to be like, okay, I can't just always distract myself with more work and more projects just because I like them. So I stopped and I removed things, and I brought the podcast back probably 3 or 4 months ago after a 2-3 month break, because I was like, I actually like doing it. I get something out of it. And every time I think maybe I'm not going to do it anymore, someone messages me about it and thanks me. And so it's always like a little universe
You're
giving
doing
me
a
a
great
sign.
service. I think it's fabulous.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Good
You're
question.
very good at what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So let's get wrapped up here. But before we wrap up, and I said links are below, but where can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you or take advantage of some of your services?
Well, you could look on my website, which is Belmont Wellness, which I assume would be, and you will have that written. And there you'll find the resources, and there's a lot of podcast clips and all my books, and the other place is Amazon author page.
Yep. Which I've read that too. Well, This is great. And again, to everyone listening, those links are below. I ordered the book, your latest book. It should be here today. I should have ordered it earlier. That was my bad.
I want to send it to you. I didn't even think of it.
Oh, that's okay. It's, you know what? I have like,
for it.
No, I'm happy to support you. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for your time again. And
thank you for having me. Really, I love talking to you. You're fabulous.
Well, thank you. I love talking to you too. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Hope so.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.